I'd like to introduce Deborah Boldt, who will in turn introduce our next session and our speakers. Deborah.
Thank you, Linda. And I'm so happy to welcome you to the next presentation, which is Finding Your Own Torah, Being Black and Jewish. And we have a wonderful panel today, and I'm going to introduce my dear friend Scott Melton. Scott is currently an instructor of English and Spanish at the Fay School in Southborough, Massachusetts. Prior to Fay, he served as a policy consultant for New Mexico Thrives, a consortium serving over 100 member nonprofits based right here in Albuquerque. He was also an English, philosophy, film, and Spanish instructor at the Bosque School, where he served as Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Previously, Scott was at St. Andrew's School in Florida, where he taught an International Baccalaureate Theory of Knowledge, and as well as English, History, and German. Scott holds a BA in Linguistics and German Literature from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and an MA in German Studies, Second Language Acquisition and Critical Queer Theory from the University of Arizona in Tucson. He is also fluent in German, Spanish, and Hebrew. Prior to his teaching career, Scott was a lobbyist, public policy content expert, and the Associate State Director for AARP Florida. Scott's going to introduce our other wonderful panelists, so I'll turn it over to him. Scott?
Thank you, Deborah. I have two wonderful colleagues with me here today. Jill Anthony, who is our Director of Diversity at the Fay School. Prior to that, she was a Latin teacher for many, many years. And that was in, where was that?
Maryland, Texas.
In St. Thomas? And in St. Thomas. Okay, very cool. And Justin Terry Smith, newly Dr. Justin Terry Smith, who is an author, a regular contributor for various magazines. No, I've got this. I'm trying to read. It's like the list is really long. Let me see. Author, rancher now, because he's 80 acres in Moriarty. Justin and I actually go way back in a strange sort of way. We're both from the DC area. We know all of the same people and did not actually run into each other until we met here. It's kind of bizarre. So what I wanted to talk about, or what we wanted to talk about, is how having an identity that is both black and Jewish in American society and American Jewish society, which operates largely under an Ashkenormative assumption that everyone is Ashkenazi, and everyone clearly, from Mr. Martinez's speech, was not. We aren't. About 20% of Judaism, or 20% of Jews, are people of color. And that makes for a somewhat precarious relationship with Judaism for many of us. It was interesting. Before I came here, I thought to myself, I'm going to see who else. I'm going to see who the who's who list is of who's black and Jewish. And the amazing list, if you go to myjudaism.com, they've got a fantastic list of the 20 most influential people who are black and Jewish. Some of them are people I know, some of them are friends of mine. Rabbi Isaiah Rothstein is in there. And the last person on the list is Sammy Davis Jr. Yeah. So here's me being controversial. I am Archie Bunker's worst nightmare come true. I'm a gay black Hebe. And I cannot tell you how many times I've walked into a synagogue and someone says to me, "Oh, you're black and you're Jewish?" And I'm like, "Yeah." "Oh, like Sammy Davis." And it's like, "Really?" So, yeah, you too? Yeah.
I look like him.
That's true.
I don't get that.
So, so it's been a roller coaster in many different ways. I'm going to wind the clock back. My history with New Mexico is about 200 years worth. My mother's family, both sides, settled in this area around between 1840 and 1860. The family is half German. The German side are direct descendants of Karl Maria von Weber. The Welsh side came over on the Mayflower. And I know there are lots of little question marks above lots of heads. It's like, well, why is he Jewish? It's like, because I converted when I was 18. My father was black. My father was born in 1916. My grandfather was born in 1861. In other words, my grandfather was born a slave. My father grew up until 1922 on the original farm, the land that was deeded to them and then later stolen from them during the Jim Crow era, and they fled, and they did not stop running until they got to Cleveland, which, whatever. Not the place I would have stopped, but whatever, it's like you stop or you stop. So my journey into Judaism started very early. Both of my parents, they got together in 1959 when it wasn't legal in 26 states. And my grandfather, being from an old patrician German family, was like, absolutely not. My mother was dead as far as he was concerned. Not uncommon. And it wasn't until we came here to Albuquerque in 1969 that my great aunt, and many of you would probably know Charlie Lemke and his wife Ruth, so my great uncle and my great aunt. My great aunt got on the phone, called up my grandfather and my grandmother, and basically said, here's how this is going to work. Either you see your daughter and her husband and her children, or you will never hear from any of us ever again. She totally flipped it. And then after going to dinner at La Placita, we ended up at ACC, and my father is one of the first black men to ever step foot into ACC as a customer, not as the help. So my roots here are very, very strong. Again, why Judaism? Both of my parents, having been children of the 60s, my mother grew up actually in Los Angeles, went to University High. She was best friends with Lotta Klemperer during her college days at UCLA. And she really was imbued with, even though she wasn't, she was imbued with a Jewish identity and continued that throughout her life. My father, on the other hand, he was actually the one, even though he wasn't German, he was the one who spoke German because he worked in Germany for the American military, for the Department of the Army, designing preemptive peacekeeping equipment, whatever that means. Euphemisms for 500. And So when they got together, they really decided religion was not what they wanted to imprint on either one of their children. I needed a little bit more. And I tried I went to youth groups with my friends who were Christian. That was not working for me at all. And then it never even dawned on me, oddly enough, because the majority of my friends were all Jewish, but I never even considered going to a synagogue for some reason until somebody said, hey, why don't you come to synagogue with me? And all of a sudden, everything clicked and fell into place. And on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, 5742, or 1981, I converted. Oddly enough, I have only seen my father well up, not actually cry, but well up and tear, twice in my life. Once was my conversion. The other time was when I bought my first house. I found out, so my father died in 2003. I found out in 2013 or 14, a friend of mine who was working for National Geographic was doing a genetic mapping project. And he kept bugging me. He was like, Scott, you've got to do your DNA. And I was like, no, you don't. It's not a thing. It's not happening. It's like, you are not sticking that swab in my mouth. It's not happening. But he finally did. And 6 months later, I get this report that's more like a tome. And if you know anything about those of us who are African American, knowing what our family lineage is past the farm, past 2 or 3 generations, is next to impossible to decipher. DNA is a different story. My DNA maps back to Ethiopia, Mozambique, and, oh yeah, Fertile Crescent. And like when I got the report, I was like, what? This makes no sense to me. So I finally asked, I got on the phone and had a conference with Joel, and I was like, what does all this mean? And he was like, dude, your father was Jewish. I was like, what? This is completely impossible. It's like my father had no idea of this. It's like, he was a slave. He was the son of a slave. How is that even possible? But apparently science doesn't lie. And who knew? And I have to think to myself, was there something intuitive in my father when I was saying the Shema and converting to Judaism? And that's the exact point at which my father started to well up, is when I said the Shema. Which makes me wonder, was there something in him that knew? I don't know. So that's my story. And we'll get into how we negotiate ourselves in Jewish spaces in a minute. But I want to hear from my colleagues first. Jill?
Sure. My story is a little bit quicker. Not as deep. I wrote myself little notes so I would remember what to say. I grew up on the Lower East Side in Manhattan, in New York. Yes, thank you. And for anyone who has ever walked down Grand Street towards the East River, it is half Orthodox and half Puerto Rican, Dominican. And that is where the blackness in my family comes from, is Afro-Latino. And the Jewish side, my mom's side of the family, I'm the 4th generation to live on the Lower East Side. Everybody lived within 5-minute walking distance of each other down Grand Street or East Broadway. And both of my mom's grandparents immigrated in the late 30s and early 40s. One her father's family from Belarus and her mother's family from Poland and Italy. And both of those sides of my family were very religious Jewish, not Orthodox, but everyone that lived in my building was Orthodox, and I would go visit friends growing up in different neighborhoods and thought it was weird that the elevators didn't stop on every floor on Fridays and Saturdays because mine did. And those were my friends. Those were the kids that were my age in my building. And I even recently thinking about when suddenly Russ and Daughters became really popular on Instagram, and I would think like, well, that's where we got our knishes, that now it's like the place to be. It was odd to me. So growing up, I had these very deep family and neighborhood connections to Judaism in the sense that it surrounded me all the time. And my mom, my dad grew up Catholic, my mom grew up in her Jewish family, neither of whom were particularly religious. My mom was hippie, went to Woodstock, very love everybody, new agey, spiritual, I would say. She went to synagogue, she went to church, she went to various groups in the neighborhood and participated in anything and everything as a way to find community, and as a way to find peace within herself. I wouldn't say it was to find connection to Judaism. But she was into it and loved it and brought me along, and we never really talked about it. It was never a huge part of my upbringing. And as a child going to school in Manhattan, all of your friends have bat mitzvahs, and you go and you have a great time, and you sort of wonder, why didn't I do this? And bless you. So for me, as I grew older, I have sought out those places similar to the way that my mom did, to find community, to find peace, and to connect with my family in different ways. My family, my mom's dad's side of the family, and I don't share a lot of the same views in life, which is fine, but I've been able to connect with them through this. And I've been able to have really great relationships with cousins across the U.S. And on my mom's mother's side of the family, same thing. Everybody has sort of found their brand of Judaism. And for me, as I continue on this journey to find what works for me, it's been really beautiful. And I think forever I will always be not even just a New Yorker, Lower East Side resident at heart, because it is such a specific place, specifically in the Jewish religion. And I think that is such a big part of my identity and who I am, and something that I really celebrate because of the community that it brought me. And that is my connection to Judaism.
Nice. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Justin, and I am actually originally from Silver Spring, Maryland, where we have a very big Jewish community. And growing up in Silver Spring, like your community was blacks, Asians, like every single ethnicity under the sun. And of course, there was also Jewish households. And I went to school with all of them. And sometimes I didn't understand why they weren't in school. And I was like, well, where are my Jewish friends? They're not in school. I'm like, oh, what is it called? Rosh Hashanah or something? What, or Yom Kippur or something like that? What is that? And I never really understood. And I said, what is that thing in your door? And I would always have to ask them questions because I just wanted to know, and I wanted to educate myself so I didn't seem ignorant. I went to church every Sunday. I was made to go to church every Sunday. My dad was a deacon, and that was interesting, to say the least. Being forced to go to Presbyterian church every Sunday, every Sunday school, and then also trying to lead that example, like, I'm the deacon's son. I am going to be straight and narrow and blah, blah, blah. And obviously that didn't happen. So when I was 19 years old, I did a year of college and I came back home. It wasn't a great year for me. I was gay bashed in college, and I came back home just because I needed that recharge. I needed to be mentally healthy. And my dad woke me up at, every Sunday at the same time. All right, let's go. We're going to Sunday school and then we're going to church. I'm like, no. And he looked, what did you say to me? And I'm like, no. So I refused. And then when he said to me, when I get back from church, you better be gone, I said, okay. So I was living on the streets for a couple days, and I finally found a room in DC to live in. I joined the military because it saved my life. I'm a disabled veteran. And I was lost, spiritually lost, and I didn't understand where I was going. In my family, on my mother's side, we always, like Scott was saying before, we don't know a lot about our lineage because of slavery. So, it was always rumored that we were Jewish, and by ethnicity. And I said, well, I don't understand that. I'm black. How's that possible? And of course, I didn't quite understand. I didn't quite comprehend. So then, of course, there's genetic tests. And I said, hey, Mom, open your mouth. Like I'm just going to take this into the lab. So I bought my mom and my dad a 23andMe test because I wanted to see if it was true. Yeah, they are my parents, but love you guys. I know you're going to see this later. But then I noticed that there's a blue marker, and it said Ashkenazi Jew. And then that was 10%. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's my mom's side. Oh, wait, I'm Jewish? Wow, okay. So then it said Iberian Peninsula, and then it came out with another 10%. And I said, wait a second. My family's always rumored that it was Spanish Jews that came from Spain that settled in North Carolina that met my family, my black family. And what the actual truth is, they had slaves. And the difference is that a slave is a slave regardless of how they're treated. However, what they did was they were actually abolitionists. So they would buy the slaves and teach them how to read and write. And eventually what they did was then when they went back to Spain, they gave a lot of that land in North Carolina to them. And so they said, you're free, and gave them land. So I did come from free slaves as well. I never really, it was word of mouth, and I'd never really believed it until I actually did another genetic test because I was like, I need validation. So then I did another one, and it said Hispanic Jew 23%. And I was like, oh, wow, yeah, that's me. Wow, those are my ancestors. I'm Jewish. Now what do I do? So then I said, okay, well, I've been a Christian all my life, and I'm a little tired of it. So it's a little, not me. I just never really took, never. So I said, well, what do I do? And then so I started reading about Judaism, and I said, wow, this is interesting. I feel like I should have been doing this all along, like since my birth. Like, where's my bar mitzvah? Like, what happened to that? My parties and all this, but Christians. So then I started my conversion process, and wow, that was intense, very, very intense. But it felt nourishing to me, like spiritually. Like I said to myself, this is where I should have been a long time ago. When I step into a synagogue, I do feel at home. So then I tried to find out, okay, so which branch of Judaism should I try? And I said, oh, look, that's Orthodox? Oh, I don't think that, I can't do that. No, I've got tattoos. I'm not getting anything removed. This thing's hurt. So then I said, okay, well, what's the other end? Okay, that's Reconstruction. No, I can't do that either. No, I'm good. So then I said, okay, we have Reform and Conservatism. And conservative. I said, okay, well, conservative sounds conservative. So I don't know. So then I chose Reform. And I felt at home being a Reformed Jew. And when I walk into a synagogue, I do get those looks. It doesn't matter which synagogue I walk into. It's like, hi, can I help you? I'm like, yeah, it's Friday. Sure. Do you got the book? Okay, great. Thanks. I'll be in the back. So I get those looks all the time, and it's a little annoying because then the questions come. How are you Jewish? I'm like, I don't think you would ask another Ashkenazi Jew this when they're walking into your synagogue. So when I press them like that, they're like, oh, I don't mean any offense. I'm like, you don't mean it. However, when someone starts a question, I don't want to offend you, but it's like, you're going to offend me. I'm telling you now. So it's okay to ask questions, how are you Jewish? And I kind of got used to it, and I said, you know what, this is just going to be an ongoing thing because, this skin is not coming off. So, yeah. But I started, after my conversion process, I started looking for communities. Like you said, you were looking for communities. And I found the Multiracial Jewish Network in D.C. I found Jews and All Jews in New York. And I started participating a lot in them, and I absolutely loved it. And I'm a Jew until the day I die, and I'm very proud of it.
Thank you, Justin. That was amazing. Negotiating Jewish spaces as a person of color, as someone who is black, is quite often a little, not just Jewish spaces. So Deborah mentioned that I taught at St. Andrew's School in Boca. And of course, it's Boca Raton, even though it was St. Andrew's and it's a school with an Episcopal affiliation, very light. Because 40% of the school was Jewish, including the teachers. And I will never forget the day that someone walked up to me and said, oh, I never would have guessed you were black. You have multiple degrees and speak multiple languages. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. So, and she was Jewish, which really annoyed me. So I really started getting involved in DEI work when I first moved here, because I was hired by Bosque School to be their director of DEI. And then later on, I was asked to work on a committee for DEI with the Jewish community, with our very own Phyllis. Yay, Phyllis. And we did an awful lot of work. And that particular committee was formed in the wake of Floyd? Yes, in the wake of Floyd. Because the Jewish community here in Albuquerque was looking for a way to respond, and then stopped themselves, thank goodness, because they realized very quickly that we've got our own issues within the Jewish community here around race, and we haven't gotten it right yet. So that is precisely why this committee was formed, with representatives from all of the various Jewish agencies in Albuquerque and a couple in Santa Fe as well, to address this issue and see what can we do? How can we bring our individual communities along and really move them into a space where the Ashkenormative assumption is not guiding questions about legitimacy. Because when you ask somebody, what are you doing here? You are basically saying you are not legitimately here. And when you compare somebody to Sammy Davis Jr., again, it's like, well, he's kind of legitimate because he's a celebrity, but you're not a celebrity. So you're not really as legitimate as. So there's the comparison factor going on. And that needs to stop. It really needs to stop. And, you know, life is so much more complex than anybody would like to admit. As humans, I think it's part of human nature. We want to go for the simplest answer possible, but the simple answers don't really work in complex situations. It's very nuanced. And understanding that nuance, helping other people understand that nuance. I mean, as Justin said, like it or not, I can't escape the skin. I'm going to be thrown into that situation. How I handle it is my business. How other people handle it when I put the ball back in their court is up to them. Jill, would you like to add anything?
Sure. So in terms of navigating Jewish spaces, I think for me, sorry, thank you. As a multiracial person who does not look like anybody on either side of my family, navigating spaces where I don't really fit in has been my whole life. I don't look like anyone on my dad's side of the family. I am lighter than all of them. I am darker than all of my mom's side of the family. And they've talked about it and joked about it, and I did not find it funny. So for me, walking into a space that in my head, of course I belong, and getting those looks has sort of been my norm. For Jewish communities, I think because of where I lived, I was in the building, I was invited. And I was able to fit in because my friends were Orthodox and because my other friends in the neighborhood did look like me. It's a Puerto Rican and Jewish community that I lived in the right place to look like me. As I grew older, I found Jewish communities in different neighborhoods and places where I've lived, synagogues specifically, some of the most beautiful and supportive communities that I've been a part of. I've also found places that have been incredibly financially exclusionary to my non-generational wealth having person and didn't really know what to do with that. So I was forced to practice in my own way that worked for me and figure out how I would practice that aligned with my own values. And then about 15 years ago, maybe a little bit more, I moved to St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands on a whim, but I was teaching there, and it's not all beaches every day. You still have to go to work. And in St. Thomas, they have the second oldest synagogue in the U.S., and it is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. There's sand covering the floor, remnants of when you couldn't make noise, and they wanted to hide the sounds of songs and footsteps because they weren't able to practice in public. And something about St. Thomas, it is mostly West Indian, and in that synagogue, there were about 20 Black families that would show up every Friday and every holiday, and everything was free. And it was the first synagogue that I had been a part of that I felt like I could just be and exist in my kind of Judaism that worked for me. I'm still looking for that here. But I do think knowing that communities like that exist has helped me navigate those spaces as an adult in a different way as I learn more about myself.
Thank you.
I'd love to. So, as you probably can guess, I'm a very jokey person, and that's how I get rid of my nervousness. I'm going to start this segment out with a little bit of I am an actor as well. So that's kind of why I am the way I am, crazy. So I could play Sammy Davis Jr. I will. If I get an audition, I will play him. I will play the hell out of him. I look like him, so fine. But negotiating space. Gosh, I just had my notes in my head and I made that joke and I forgot everything I wanted to say. Oh, I know I should have. But no, negotiating space. I think it's being black, bi, and Jewish. I often find that I have to do that and feel like I have to defend myself constantly. It's always a constant feeling of I'm on defense and I'm always have this fence up because I'm vulnerable. I'm a part of 3 demographics that are vulnerable. And I kind of just knocked the door down and I kind of had that feeling of, you know what, this is me, and that they're not going to accept it. I can't say it on the mic, but you know what I want to say. So I think for me it's really hard because some of those demographics don't necessarily get along with each other. So whenever I'm in a black space or predominantly black space, and they see I have a Hebrew tat on my chest. It's my Hebrew name. It's Yadin. And they're like, oh, what's that? Is that Hebrew? I'm like, yeah. And they said, oh, you're Jewish? And I said, yeah. Oh. And you get that stare, like, oh. I didn't know. I'm like, I know, I didn't put it on my forehead with a sticky saying I'm Jewish. So when I bring that up, I get a lot of, I don't know about you guys, but I get a lot of slack about what's happening now in the world. Because I get that look like, you're dark skinned, you should be supporting Palestine. And I said, I don't really know how to respond to that, but thank you, I guess. I appreciate your time. And now get out of my space. But you know, I get that like a lot. And actually, especially online, like if I put I stand with Israel on my social media, there'll be somebody that I know that's like, wait a second, and they'll email me directly or, you know, stupidly post it on my page. What are you doing? Why are you supporting Israel? I can't be friends with you now. And I've actually walked away from a 15-year friendship. And it pains me that I had to do that. But in those spaces, you know, we as Jews of color really kind of sometimes take the brunt of that. And it's kind of really hard to say, yes, I love all of my demographics that I'm a part of, when somebody slaps me in the face because I'm a part of that demographic. So especially being LGBTQ as well, it's like, okay, all right, so my own community that I grew up knowing I'm black, like a lot of the times I got a lot of slack for being who I was. The Jewish community kind of accepted that, and they were just like, okay, yeah, whatever. But you know, it's often really hard to negotiate space. It's really, really hard sometimes. I mean, for me at least. And sometimes it makes me want to cry because it's a lot of pain, and it's a lot of having to deal with that since my conversion, since I was born. It made me a stronger person. Like, I'm an author, I'm an actor, I have a great husband, we have 2 wonderful kids who didn't want to be Jewish. Can you believe that? Okay, I'm still mad about that, but I won't bring that up to them when they see this video. But you know, it made me a strong person. Like, I went to the military, I'm a disabled veteran, I'm very proud of that. And you know, I just say to myself, this is who you are, and like I said before, I can't say it on camera, but F anybody who has a problem with it.
More power to you. I think the gist of this is that negotiating these spaces is difficult, but it's kind of one of those things that we do. The flip side of this, both of us know an awful lot of people who are black and Jewish who have exited from Jewish circles because it was just too difficult to try to negotiate those spaces. It was too painful, it was too difficult, and that's a shanda. That's not good. If people walk into your space, people who legitimately belong there, and you've made them feel like a ger, that's no good, Nick. Which is one of the reasons, but it also kind of puts the onus on those of us who want that community, want that connection. Shul shopping can be very, very, very difficult. And, it's like the old joke, two Jews trapped on a desert island. How many synagogues did they build? One for the first one for the second one for the one in case they want to go someplace else on high holy days, and a fourth one because that's the synagogue that nobody would ever be caught dead in. So it's kind of a thing. So one of the reasons I wrote, actually the reason why this panel was called Finding Your Own Torah is that's actually the title of an article that I wrote about trying, and it was actually based on Passover. It was, and what Passover means as someone who's black and Jewish, and leaving out of Mitzrayim and trying to find your way into Israel and trying to hold on to that Torah in spaces where people don't necessarily want you to, or understand why you want to, or why you should. And it's a difficult thing. It's not impossible, but it is a lot of work, and it can be very tiring. And I'm hoping that with the work that people like Rabbi Isaiah Rothstein is doing, and the work that DEI directors like Jill Anthony is doing, and the work that Justin Terry Smith is doing in both on screen, but also because he's MSW? LCSW? Okay, whatever. Clinical mental health counselor. But the point being is that all of us are making a difference in our daily lives. That spirit of teshuvah, that spirit of trying to heal the community. That's why I was a lobbyist for 12 years for AARP. It's why after I left that, I became a teacher, because all three of us want to teach. We want to educate, and we want to bring people along and show a different way of looking at things. So thank you, and if there are any questions, we'd be more than happy to field them.
Deborah.
Thank you so much for sharing your truths with us. And Justin, I have a question for you. You said that you had two swab tests. The first was with 23andMe, and then the second was with?
Oh gosh, I don't remember. I think it's called Genome Link. I think that's what it's called.
The reason I'm asking is you had mentioned that with the second one, it showed that you had 26% I think it was
Hispanic Jew.
Yeah, Sephardic
yeah.
Jew. Was that shown in your first 23andMe test?
No, it wasn't. 23andMe doesn't show that. All they have is the Ashkenazi Jew marker. And then what they do is, like, you kind of have to suss it out, right? You kind of have to like just say, oh, there's an Iberian Peninsula, and that's another 10%. But the genome one was a little bit more specific. It was very exact. And I was like, wow, it says Hispanic Jew on there. I didn't realize that that would be on there.
So did it show that you had any Ashkenazi? Yes, you said 10%, I think.
Yes.
And so was that also found in the second swab
I
test?
gotta think. It's years ago. I don't think so.
Interesting.
Wait. Oh gosh, I want to say I don't want to miss information, but I think it did. I'm not sure because it was a while ago. It was years ago, so I don't remember.
Well, thank you. This has been really terrific, and I think I very much appreciate you bringing us your sharing with us.
Thank you for your question.
Hi. I appreciate what you're going through, and I just wanted to relate. I have a cousin who belongs to a synagogue on 70th on the west side of Manhattan, and a few years ago, their rabbi was a black woman who also was a lesbian. So they filled all the little ticky marks. So anyway, good luck.
I think there was a question from over here. Margreta. Wait. Let me give you the microphone.
Okay. It's important. Thank you. Short question for Jill. How old is that synagogue in St. Thomas? If you happen to know.
My phone's in my bag over there, but I will find that out.
Okay, but if you're wondering why I'm asking, I was wondering if it precedes the American ownership of the Virgin Islands, or if is it older than that?
I believe it does.
It belonged to Denmark before that, and they have the oldest synagogue in Copenhagen as well.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Both Justin and Scott, since you grew up Christian,
I did not.
I'm sorry.
Atheist, thank you.
The implication was that you converted in Ashkenazi synagogues, and I'm wondering if there was any consideration, for I've read occasionally about Israelite synagogues, and that are mostly black, if you went to them at all.
So the Black Israelite movement is, how do we go there? Oh, lovely. So the Black Israelite movement is kind of an offspin that is convinced that the lost tribes are black, are Native American in some circles. They don't actually agree amongst themselves about who is and who isn't. And the way in which they practice has lots of overtones of Christianity in it. You know, I'm probably going to get my tongue cut out as soon as I go into the parking lot, but yeah. Sorry, that got dark really quick. But it's, for me, I know I can only speak for myself. I gravitated towards something that was, I also was converted in in a Reform synagogue. I belong to a Reform synagogue in Massachusetts now, since even though my home is here, I spend 10 months out of the year in Southborough, Massachusetts, and so that's where I go to shul. And shul shopping, I made the mistake of going to a shul in Framingham. That was a really bad decision. You know who I'm talking about? Yeah. It was very, very bad experience, like extremely painful. But the shul that I go to, B'nai Shalom in Westboro, is wonderful. Our rabbi is a lesbian, thank you, and her wife is wonderful, and we have a very, very active LGBTQ chavara, and there are many people who look like me and look like Justin and look like Jill who go to that synagogue. and are Jewish, and their parents were Jewish, and they've always been Jewish. So that is what I look for.
Okay. Oh gosh, I have to. Oh gosh. Okay. I know. So speaking of the Hebrew Israelites, is that what, Black Israelites? I have had experiences with that population, and I ran away. And they were pretty much on the corner trying to preach to me, and I'm like, this is not what we do. Like, we don't do this. And it just turned me off completely, and I just was like, I can't even listen to you talk. I just have to keep going, keep walking. And then when they find out that I'm Jewish, then that's, I've been called a sellout before. I've been called so many things, and it's just like, okay, well, this is obviously not for me. And because I believe that every spirituality or religion should preach love, and even if they're different, like I grew up. My best friend since I was 2 years old was a Muslim, so it's just like I don't really understand the whole aggressiveness of them. For me, I think like Scott, like I converted under Reform, and and I we'll talk about that later.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. I was looking into making Aliyah. Yeah, but it's really hard. But that's my opinion on them.
Justin, I was wondering if you ever reconciled with your father.
Yes, we did. My father's a very interesting man. He did say something to me that really touched my heart. When I left Christianity, I said, "Dad, I'm a Jew now." What? Like I was like a Jew, and he was like, "Son, if you were going to convert to any religion, that would be it." And I said, "Well, thank you, shalom. Now, bye." Currently, we're, the relationship is kind of rocky, but, we still love each other. We, it's just the way it is with us, I guess, and I've accepted that.
I think that's kind of a thing with.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah.
We have
oh
one.
gosh, my
Excuse
father
me,
and I.
we'll take one
we-
more question from Linda.
Okay.
And then we have an announcement before the break. So Linda, please.
Okay, so I was really struck by that person who told you, Justin, well, you should be pro-Palestinian because of the color of your skin. And that person obviously doesn't know very much about Israel, because Israel is not white. It is more like Jill, and definitely like you. There are all sorts of Jews in Israel. You have the Ethiopians, you have the Yemenite, you have Mizrahi Jews. They are not light-skinned, they're not Ashkenazi. And in the old days, there used to be some sort of prohibition between the Sephardic Jews and the Ashkenazi Jews in intermarriage. It doesn't exist anymore. And so you have a range of color in Israel, and you will be very welcome there.
I've actually, sorry about that. Sorry. I've actually been to Israel before. I was there for 2 weeks in 2018, and I loved it. Mizrahis have better food. But yeah, exactly. So I had a great time, and I did see all shades there. And I did. Like, I walked down the street, and of course, looking at me, they're like, "You're definitely African American. Like, we can tell." And I said, "Oh, really?" And they're like, "Yeah, we can." They can even tell, like, you're not a person from Africa because you just look nothing like them, and also, you're African American, so you look a certain way. But yeah, I loved it. It was very spiritually enlightening. I went there right after I converted. So I was just like, this was my spiritual journey for myself, and I had to go see what I like to call my mother country, and I call Africa, which is a whole continent, my father continent. But my family's from Gabon, so that would be my father country.
If there are no other questions, I think it's time we have a little break.
We have one announcement.